Ah, yes, here we are, we're back. 788, here we go. There once was a baker of Nottingham, who in making eclairs would put snot in 'em. When he ran out of snot, he would, like as not, take his pecker and jack off a shot in 'em. That made me chortle. There was a young fellow of Perth, the nastiest bastard on earth. When his wife was confined, he pulled down the blind and ate up the whole after birth. Well, he was hungry. A mannerly fellow named Fife was greatly distressed by his wife, for whene'er she was able, she'd shit on the table and gobble the shit with her knife. There were two little mice in Rangoon who sought lunch in an old lady's womb. Cried one mouse, "By Jesus, I'll wager this cheese is as old as the cheese in the moon." Where was a young lady of rhymes who was terribly plagued... Oh, take two this time. Act like you know what you're doing. Where was a young lady of reams who was terribly plagued with wet dreams. She saved up a dozen and sent to her cousin, who ate them and thought they were creams. Sharing is caring. An elderly rabbi named Riskin dines daily on cunt juice and foreskin, and to further his bliss at dessert he'll drink piss, for which he is always a-thirstin'. There was a young man known as Royce, who took an emetic by choice. He was fed quite by chance half the crotch of the pants of a girl who kept crab lice as toys. Toys. It's not that much of a stretch. There was a young man of St. Just, who ate of new bread till he bust. It was not the crumb, for that passed through his bum, but what buggered him up was the crust. There was an old man of Seringapatam, besmeared his wife's anus with raspberry jam, then licked off the sweet and pronounced it a treat, and for public opinion he cared not a damn. There was a young lady of Taunton, whose taste grew perverted and rotten. She cared not for steaks or for pastry and cakes, but lived upon penis au gratin. I always loved au gratin potatoes when I was younger, when I was a child. There was a young man of the Tweed, who sucked his wife's arse through a reed. When she had diarrhea, he'd let none come near. Let me start over. There was a young man of the Tweed, who sucked his wife's arse through a reed. When she had diarrhea, he'd let none come near, for fear they should poach on his feed. There was a young pair from Uganda, who were having a fuck on a veranda. The drip from their fucks fed 42 ducks, 3 geese, and a fucking big gander. A hungry old trollop from Yemen did a pretty good business with he-men, but she gave up all fucking in favor of sucking for the protein contained in the semen. Well, you know, your health is your wealth. What am I doing? Oh my goodness. All right, this is in German, so I will be mispronouncing everything. New chapter entitled Virginity. Saß Meidelein unter den Eichen und spielt mit dem Knablein Matschen. Dem niedlichen Zweck bollis der Kranz weg, blieb nichts davon nur das Kasten. I don't know. There's umlauts everywhere and just lots of mental confusion on my part. Oh, thank goodness, back to English. Somebody's texting me. How glorious. How glorious for me. A maiden sat under a tree and played with the lad's fiddle-dee. His little wood post, soon her jewel is lost. What? A maiden sat under a tree and played with the lad's fiddle-dee. His little wood post, soon her jewel is lost from the casket where it used to be. Competition is keen, you'll agree, said an ancient old let's do that again. Competition is keen, you'll agree, said an ancient old flapper from D. So she dyed her grey tresses, chopped a foot from her dresses, and her raisin and her roson you can plainly see. You plainly can see. The bride went up the aisle in traditional virginal style, but they say she was nary an innocent cherry, but a whore from the banks of the Nile. There was a young virgin named Alice, who thought of her cunt as a chalice. One night, sleeping nude, she awoke feeling lewd and found in her chalice a phallus. I like that one a lot. It's so musical. There was a young lady of Andover, and the boys used to ask her to hand over her sexual favor, which she did, may God save her, for her morals she had no command over. There was a young girl named Ann Heiser, who said that no man could surprise her, but Paps took a chance, found Schlitz in her pants, and now she is sadder but wiser. Oh, that is very clever. Beer makes you smart, it made Budweiser. To the shrine which was Pallas Athena's, young Bitto, who learned about penis, brought her needles and thread and scissors and said, "You can stick them, I'm changing to Venus." There's a tiresome young girl in Bay Shore. When her fiancé cried, "I adore your beautiful twat," she replied, "Like as not. It's pretty, but what is it for?" Dumb as a bag of a box of rocks. There once was a tart named Belinda, whose cunt opened out like a window, but she'd slam the thing shut, the contemptible slut, whenever you tried to get into. A lisping young lady named Beth was saved from a fate worse than death 7 times in a row, which unsettled her so that she quit saying no and said yes. Suffering succotash. There was a young lady of Bore who was courted by gallants galore. Their ardent protesting she found interesting and ended her life as a virgin. Thought I was going to say whore, didn't you? I did too. I was as surprised as you. There was a young fellow named Biddle, whose girl had to teach him to fiddle. She grabbed hold of his bow and said, "If you want to know, you can try parting my hair in the middle." In Stokes lived an ugly blue-stocking, who declared the men's manners were shocking. Why, she'd never been diddled, even fingered or fiddled, so she finally moved over to fucking. Oh, goodness me. Turning the page. Ooh, there was a young virgin of Bude, whose tricks, though exciting, were viewed with distrust by the males, for she'd fondle their rails, but never would let them intrude. There was an old spinster named Campbell, got tangled one day in a bramble. She cried, "Ouch! How it sticks! But so many sharp pricks are not met every day on a ramble." There was a young girl from the Cape who filled her hole with bicycle tape to ease up the pangs caused by the wangs of gentlemen bent upon rape. There was a young miss from Cape Cod, who at soldiers would not even nod, but she tripped in a ditch and some son of a bitch of a corporal raped her, by God. There once was a passionate Celt, who'd an urge to know how a cock felt. One went in hard and straight, but her heat was so great that she found she had caused it to melt. A Salvation lassie named Claire was having her first love affair. As she climbed into bed, she reverently said, "I wish to be opened with prayer." An innocent maiden of Clewar incited her boyfriend to screw her. She tried to say no, a half-second slow. Now when she sits down, she says, "Ooh." There was a young lady of Corby who said, "Oh, the man really bore me. But I reckon without him, though I hate him and scout him, there just would be no one to scour me." Scour me. And moving on. There was a young lady of Crewe whose chariot chap had got through, which she told to her mother, who fixed her another out of rubber and red ink and glue. There was a young princess called Dagmar, who said, "I should so like to shagmar." And says she, "If you speaks to the king of the Greeks, he will lend me his own tallywagmar." Yes, we're moving on. There was a young girl of Dalkeith with a hymen in need of relief. So she went to the doctor, who prodded and shocked her and stretched it with fingers and teeth. A girl named Alice in Dallas had never felt of a phallus. She remained virgo intacto, because ipso facto no phallus in Dallas fit Alice. An ignorant virgin of D entertained An ignorant virgin of D entertained a man's cock just to see if the darn thing would fit. It went off in her pit, and she cried, "Hey, that's no place to pee!" A young lady who taught at Devizes was had up at the local assizes for teaching young boys matrimonial joys and giving French letters as prizes. A complacent old don of divinity made boast of his daughter's virginity. They must have been dawdling down at old Magdalen. It couldn't have happened at Trinity. There was a young virgin of Dover who was raped in the woods by a drover. When the going got hard, he greased her with lard, which felt nice, so they started all over. There was a young girl of East Lynn, whose mother, to save her from sin, had filled up her crack to the brim with shellac, but the boys picked it out with a pin. The first love of a lady named Edderly found her hymen obstructed him steadily, but he merely rubbed lard on the end of his hard-on, and then found he entered quite readily. There was a blue-stocking in Florence, wrote anti-sex pamphlets in torrents, till a Spanish grandee got her off with his knee, and she burned all her works with abhorrence. A homely old spinster of France, who all the men looked at askance, threw her skirt overhead and then jumped into bed, saying, Now I've at least half a chance." Oh, these are very, very entertaining. There was a young fellow named Fife who married the pride of his life, but imagine his pain when he struggled in vain and just couldn't get it into his wife. I feel frustrated. Oh, it continues. Now the trouble was not with our hero, who, though no match for Epstein or Nero, had a good little dong that was 5 inches long and as stiff as a parsnip at 0. But his efforts to poke her, assiduous, met a dense growth of hair most prodigious. Well, he thought he might dent her by waiting till winter, but he found that she wasn't deciduous. Now here was this fellow named Fife, unable to diddle his wife, which fact, sad but true, left him nothing to do but bugger the girl all his life. For diversion this might have been funny, and of course it did save him some money, but it angered our Fifey to think that his wifey was hoarding her deep nest of honey. He went whoring to find satisfaction, but with whores, though accomplished in action, he never could capture that fine fucking rapture, for the thought of his wife was distraction. So here was our fellow named Fife, with a truly impervious wife. She was not worth a damn, being closed as a clam. Why, he couldn't get it in with a knife. The problem that harassed his soul was what kept him out of her hole. Was her hymen too tough? Was she stuffed up with fluff? Was her koozie the home of a mole? This was just what poor Fife couldn't tell, for her prow was as sound as a bell. He'd have needed a gimlet to get into her quimlet, and it made the poor guy mad as hell. He applied to that fellow from Strensel for help from his long pointed pencil, but Strency's tool now was as blunt as the prow of a tug. He'd have needed a stencil. Turning the page. Oh, this is a long one. Oh, my goodness. Fife searched for the chap from New York who had punctured the hymen like cork, but he was quite coy, for he now loved a boy and refused to help Fife with the stork. Fife asked Durand how much he'd charge, the fellow whose cock could contract or enlarge, to drill his way in with his prick like a pin and there make it slowly enlarge. But Durand, though he'd fuck with no urging, warmed, "Apart from the risk that she'll burgeon, your pride must be low if you'll meekly forego a crack at a genuine virgin." In the spring in the woods Fife did wander late, and saw couples preparing to copulate, but he could not abide the gay sight, and he cried at the thought that the pig-fuckers penetrate. One couple he foolishly leapt on, to examine the wound and the weapon. One was rigid, one deep, the snug fit made him weep, and in shame and contrition he crept on. In the meantime Fife's wife, who had wed, with some thought of the pleasures of bed, was becoming depressed, in fact damn near obsessed by her terribly tough maiden head. She remarked, "When all the joking is done, what I honestly want is a son. I would like impregnation, if not copulation, but to wed and have neither's no fun." She grew worried and nervous and thin, till Fife said, "You would jump at a pin." And these words, though unkind, put the thought in her mind that a pinpoint perhaps might get in. Thus she thought of synthetic conception, which at first seemed like basest deception, but her cunt was so sore from Fifey's trying to bore that she gave the thought better reception. And indeed, though it's sad to relate it, her first fuck was so sadly belated that a poke by a pin, though ever so thin, was a prospect that made her elated. Still going. This is very long. To be brief, the great action was done. There was artfully planted a son through a bodkin that filled her and wonderfully thrilled her, more fun than a son of a gun. This syringe, which was long but quite thin, left a hole that Fife couldn't get in, but he kept right on busting and jousting and thrusting on account of his excess of vim. While she mused on this synthetic screw, the sperm got well planted and grew, and the great day approached when her breech would be broached, but Fife the poor wretch never knew. One night, while in sheer desperation, he prodded and poked like tarnation. His wife groaned with pain. She gave way. Would he gain the goal of 3 years' contemplation? The head of his dingus went in. He felt sure he was going to win. He thrust like a demon. He spilt all his semen and scraped off a square inch of skin. But despite all his trying, he found he was losing, not gaining his ground. Though he clung to her thighs while he tried for the prize, each push in caused a greater rebound. The harder the poor fellow tried, the more her hold filled from inside, till he fell back quite spent, his prick battered and bent, and a few minutes later he died. As he passed, a new life was begun, and his tomb tells how he was undone. Shed a tear for poor Fife, his imperforate wife did him in with the aid of their son. Oh my, that is wonderful. It's so long. What a story. Oh, a neuropath virgin named Flynn shouted before she gave in, "It isn't the deed or the fear of the seed, but that big worm that's shedding its skin." There was a young fellow named Gluck, who found himself shit out of luck. Though he petted and wooed, when he tried to get screwed, he found virgins just don't give a fuck. That was very good. I think we'll stop. I think we'll stop there at 864. I really enjoyed those. I hope you did too. Was it 864? Yes, it was. Ooh.